We acknowledge that we are on the traditional lands of the Kulin Nation. We pay our respects to elders, past, present and emerging, and acknowledge the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people's spirit, imagination and rich history of storytelling and humour that is an inspiration for all Australians.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of The Bearer of Weird News. The following things remain the same. I am, as ever, your host, Matt Harvey. There is no way of telling what day it is exactly, and I am continuing to regret making that wish on the monkey paw to have a day off work. A few things before we get into the episode. I do have my upcoming Melbourne Fringe Festival shows. I'm not sure how this is going to work exactly. My shows are digital shows, but I don't know how the festival is going to look. It's supposed to be happening in November, and we are looking like possibly coming out of lockdown by the end of November, but that's going to take varying shapes and malleable forms by the time we get there. So keep an ear out. I will be having a few runs of my comedy quiz just for funny, and I'll be doing a online version of a show that I've been touring a little bit called I Got Bit by a Monkey Once, which is a storytelling show. The tickets are really cheap, so I know a lot of people are doing it hard financially. So if you want to just check out something new, and if you've enjoyed anything that I've put online, then feel free to check these out. And I'll hopefully be touring to a state near you sometime next year, or hopefully, if we can do really well, a country that is not this one sometime in 2021. But everything's up in the air. Who could say? Who even knows what's next? We're just waiting. Always waiting. But for now, let's get to the news. I will once again be the bearer of weird news. Just going to start us off with a couple of rapid fire stories. Let's get into it. New study says that penguins may have originated in either Australia or New Zealand or both. We didn't figure it out earlier because they aren't poisonous, so nobody actually suspected that they came from Australia. Basically, penguins took the advice given by white supremacists. They didn't love it, so they left. This, however, is going to be another fierce battle by Australia and New Zealand for total ownership over the origin of the bird, just like Russell Crowe, Sam Neill, Weet-Bix, and the origin of the phrase, yeah nah. And undoubtedly, eventually, the much beloved Jacinda Ardern. We will find a way to claim her, New Zealand. You better believe it. More penguin news. Pierre, an endangered northern rockhopper penguin who is less than a year old, was found washed up on the beach in Western Australia after swimming from islands in the Indian or South Atlantic Ocean. Pierre now spends his days recuperating in the Perth Zoo and watching episodes of Pingu to starve off loneliness. It's a very cute story, until you realise this is everything that we've been warned against all this time. Foreigners coming over here and sponging off the system, getting free housing, watching TV all day, and taking the jobs of hard-working Australian penguins. And sure, all penguins may historically be Australian or New Zealander, according to your, quote, science. But we are Australian. And if we've learned nothing else, it's we don't care about science in this country. This is why we're slowly gutting this CSIRO. We don't need more creatures coming over here, claiming sanctuary. We can barely successfully kill all the animals that we already have, allowing us to turn Australia into its final evolutionary form, a giant coal mine lorded over by immortan Gina. The country of Thailand is having a bit of a moment as students are participating in anti-monarchy protests. But as the students aren't allowed to openly speak against the monarchy, otherwise they risk a between 3 and 15-year jail sentence, the students have taken to using a code to refer to him, calling the king Voldemort, or rather he who should not be named. But the kids here have missed an obvious symbol of a once beloved figure for a large group who, after recent changes in statements, has earned the ire of Generation Z. J.K. Rowling. But Thailand isn't the only place that is attempting to activate its audience with the use of literature. In the UK, a librarian put dystopian books in the background of a Boris Johnson press conference. The books included The Subtle Knife, The Resistance, and Betrayed, Fahrenheit 451, Terry Pratchett's Guards, Lord of the Rings, and The Twits. Most of these send a clear message about the possibility of authoritarianism, dystopian overreach, but that requires that people have read the books. And if they haven't, they're doing an extracurriculum study assignment about the content of those books. But next time, just put a big sign up behind him saying, "He's lying!" Because clearly, nobody's checking the shelves behind these guys. Besides, if books were capable of inciting a revolution, then dictators would famously get rid of them at record rates. A new study published in Communications Biology shows that anti-predator eye spots do not occur naturally in contemporary mammals. However, researchers have decided to find out if painting eye spots on cattle rumps would reduce attacks by ambush carnivores. Originally, they tried saving the cows by painting pictures of tunnels on walls, but it was not as whimsical as it is on the TV. The results of this study were so promising, we're going to be bringing back juicy pants. We're going to bring them back into fashion so that we can replace the words with paintings of eyes on the backs of students, unemployed people, casual workers, and immigrants to protect them from being preyed on by ambush coalitions. After all, they are very easily spooked. 2 investigations are being carried out into Facebook to find out if it breaches competition laws. Presumably, the investigators have never played Monopoly, or else they wouldn't need to investigate. It is, after all, very clear. Except their Monopoly board seems to be missing the go to jail card. The European Commission has demanded internal documents from Facebook that include 2,500 specific key phrases. Facebook says that means handing over unrelated but highly sensitive data. Geez, must really suck having to give over highly personalized sensitive data, but hey, at least they have a choice in the matter. Unlike those of us who have been identified as having our information given to spy agencies by Facebook through their servers. Hypocrisy with Facebook, it's quick and easy. Recipients of the coalition government's cashless welfare cards have been denied exit from the trial. Those who were denied are being forced to prove that they don't deserve to be denied. This appears to be the coalition's go-to move. Oh yeah? Prove it. It didn't work for Robodebt, and it won't work for this either. The government says participants can exit when they, quote, demonstrate reasonable and responsible management of their affairs, including financial affairs. I mean, I'm just gonna let that hang in the air for a moment because it's just too delicious to not be enjoyed. I'm just, yum, 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 yum. The coalition calling welfare recipients fiscally irresponsible. Well, isn't that the pot calling the kettle responsible for a recession? A Japanese VR company is offering mock flights. Look, if it's to remind people of how shitty flights can be so that they will stop complaining and do what they need to do in order to get through this pandemic, then sure, I'm all for it. After all, it will only be rich assholes going anyway. Let them infect each other. This is the shittest park in Westworld. It's unfortunately, it's for the people who can't afford the $10,000 a day robot murder fuckathon that is Westworld. Or is it simply to shut up the "it's the journey, not the destination" crowd? I suspect, statistically, there's a big overlap between people who say "it's the journey, not the destination" and anti-vaxxers. It's a Venn diagram that looks like a crop circle. Hey, Chappelle, it's not about the journey, it's about the destination. Otherwise, Iran and Iraq would probably be more prone to tourism. But not many people want to visit a war zone. It's not a good travel destination. A golden wattle-inspired logo created to promote Australian products at international trade shows is being revoked after it was widely mocked for looking like a coronavirus cell. The image, created to look like the wattle flower, Australia's national flower, was chosen to represent Australia's iconography. But given Australia's extended bushfire season, seems there won't be many left for long, so we'll just have to replace it with the newest iconic image of Australia, Scott Morrison, holding coal in Parliament. Scott Morrison, putting the coal in coalition. Evil Potato, brought to life with dark magic, Peter Dutton, has proposed possible prison time for those who fail or refuse to hand over their passwords or PINs when required to do so by authorities. Under these proposals, people who are not even suspected of a crime would face a fine of up to $50,000 or up to 5 years imprisonment for declining to provide a password to their smartphone, computer, or electronic devices. So, assuming these laws pass, we are all going to have to change our passwords to something like ACAB1234 or fuck you Dutton 6969, something reasonable like that.
But wait! There's more!
Anyone who refuses to help the authorities crack a computer system when ordered will face up to 5 years in prison. And if a crime being investigated is terrorism related, then a penalty for non-compliance increases to 10 years in prison and or a $126,000 fine. Tech companies who refuse to assist authorities to crack encryption when asked to do so will face up to $10 million in fines. Which just sounds to me like this is the get around that they have created for tax loopholes. Because they aren't getting closed anytime soon, and they're going to get that money somehow. What's more, if any employee of the company tells anyone else that they have been told to do this, they will face up to 5 years in jail. I mean, Peter Dutton should be really careful about making too many laws about not providing information. He's had more than a few of his own pieces of information amnesia recently. A young boy from Dunedin on New Zealand's South Island was playing with a Lego piece in 2018 when he put it up his nostril. 2 years later, the black Lego hand fell out of the kid's nose. They wanted to replace the piece, but it's not something that's easily affordable to replace. After all, it isn't a house, it's Lego. KFC, the company turned permanent acronym, has suspended their long-term slogan, "Finger Licking Good," due to the coronavirus. The Fried C chain said in a statement that it would not be using the slogan for the first time in 64 years because it didn't quite feel right. Other things that didn't quite feel right include how I feel after slamming down a 12-piece bucket at 2 in the morning after a big night out and not nearly enough food to balance out the alcohol. But hey, I'm still doing my bit, KFC, you quitters. The move comes after the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention advised people against touching their eyes, noses and mouths amid the coronavirus pandemic. The first time the company has really taken their customers' health into concern, which is a bit of a change that will probably go away after the coronavirus does, and we go straight back to sucking down chicken buckets. Banks have been caught still charging the dead even after the Royal Commission. I mean, you can't blame them really. Most crimes get found out because the victims speak out, complaining that they're being hard done by, stolen from, or generally treated poorly, those crybabies. Which leads me to the conclusion that banks were foolish enough to charge zombies. The busiest dead people, always blathering on about brains. Presumably a metaphor for poor access to education, turning our citizens into a mindless horde repeating a short, easy to remember slogan, something like continuity and change, or back in black, or which bank, but not comprehend the larger impact of those slogans. In this instance, it is which bank is robbing digital graves? It's most of them. Honestly, it's most of them. Unless of course they suspect that vampires are indeed not only real, but very prominent in Australia, which could explain why some of those people are so very white. Oh well, that was a little bit of fun. I'll probably do a little bit one of those before each episode. I guess, at the top of each episode. Let's go on to something a little bit more in depth now. Advertising news now. Australia's biggest compromise turned city, the ACT, has banned false political ads, finally holding politicians to the high standards of Pepsi. According to reports from July 2021, an individual could be fined up to $8,000 and a corporation up to $40,500 for false political advertising. Which, given the run of political ads we had in the last election, is all political advertising, and will basically mean Clive Palmer will not be able to run any ads, ever. Which is a real shame for Twisted Sister, because they are the only ones who stand to benefit from Clive Palmer running ads. Under the new legislation, people will also be able to complain about political material to the ACT Electoral Commission, which will have powers to investigate and ask for the removal of the advertisement. Generally, people don't need the Electoral Commission to complain about advertising. That's what social media is for, right, Pepsi? But it is good to hear that there might be some possible consequences for telling lies to the public. Definitely a novel idea for most politicians. Let's not get too excited though. The legislation will only apply to authorised political material, that is, paid for ads or promotional material by a politician or political entity. So Sky News can still continue as normal then. You don't need to make up things about your opponent when the press will do it on your behalf. But most importantly, this means that individuals post on social media or an opinion piece published in a newspaper would not be subject to the new laws. Not to mention, the most popular and incendiary shows on outlets like Sky News are the opinion shows masquerading as news shows. Your Peter Credglins, your Andrew Bowles, your Paul Murrays, basically a full team of aunts and uncles who make you happy that a full family Christmas might not be happening in 2020. Then, of course, publishers cannot be held responsible for hosting false advertising. Only a person or political entity who disseminates the information. And there is also a defense if the offender could not reasonably have known the statement was inaccurate or misleading. This is an interesting defense, because the more likely someone is to create a piece of misinformation, the more likely they are to not understand what it is that they're actually angry about. Do we really think Pauline Hanson actually understands the full ramification of the shit she spews? No, we just know she knows she doesn't like non-white people. It's the only consistent point that she has put out since her maiden speech, historically to be known as the speech that launched 1,000 racist egos. Let's not pretend that this is groundbreaking. Truth in political advertising laws have operated in South Australia since 1985 and have managed to overturn a whopping 17 retractions or withdrawals during the 2014 and 2018 elections. And this will only apply in the ACT, the country's 6th smallest population. If they really wanted to get a message across, they'd be trialling this in Melbourne, because there's not only the 2nd highest population, but once Melbourne starts doing it, Sydney will get competitive and start doing it themselves. Election ACT's new Check the Source campaign will encourage voters to check the origins of electoral material so that they can determine if it is authentic, current, and safe. Look, I don't want to be the one pointing out the obvious, but have they been on social media recently? If these people were interested in checking sources, they wouldn't be sharing these memes. Guys, you are the ones being paid. You check the memes and tell us which ones are nonsense, which will subsequently be ignored because then it becomes a government agency telling people that memes about government control aren't actually accurate, subsequently turning the idea that the government is trying to control the information that you receive into truth. Come on. Let's look back at some of the most recent examples of electoral lying, social media shares, and YouTube videos. It'll be a fun trip down memory lane, the property on Monopoly board paired with traumatic court. They're the cheap properties, but really they seem more like burdens than investments. So, here we are. The past, 2019, the last election, which was rife with Election ads breaching electoral standards. There were 500 complaints, of which 87 cases of unlawful advertising were found. Apparently this Lib National ad,
Labor's new retirement tax, higher small business taxes and other new taxes will take more than $200 billion from the pockets of Australians.
was not considered a violation when it claimed the ALP will be putting a retirement tax in place, when the truth was that there was no retirement tax. Rather, it was merely an adjustment of franking credits. This is a worse manipulation of facts than when Obi-Wan tried to rewrite the past concerning what he told Luke Skywalker about his father.
So what I told you was true, from a certain point of view.
Those damn Jedi. They always were politically shady. Then it gets weirder when you dive into independent parties and non-party supporters like these guys. The Involuntary Medical Objectors Party. Don't let all that fancy talk be fooling you. They are the anti-vax party. As much as I support not forcing welfare recipients to jump through ridiculous hoops so that they don't have to suffer in order to make the difficult choice of rent or food, people should be getting vaccinated. Be they welfare recipients or tax-dodging millionaires, people should be getting vaccinated. Let's not forget Captain Get Up, who pretended to represent Get Up, but was actually created by right-wing conservative group Advance Australia, the only Avenger who is worse than Hawkeye. Look, how did either of them get onto the team? He definitely won't be getting his own solo film though. They will bring back Iron Fist before this happens. We did see some punishment though. We saw the unions get a warning for fake eviction notices pasted on LMP doors. No surprise there. Given they aren't allowed to outright lie anymore, they will have to incorporate more subtle lies. You know, like regular advertising. Paying celebrities to speak on their behalf so as to get a boost of public perception via the goodwill / horrible personal opinions that celebrity has gathered. I am sure the Jello industry is loving the goodwill that they have garnered from years of poor impressions of Bill Cosby.
Dinner's just been served, and the kid will stare at the plate and ask, "What's for dessert?" And you answer, "Jello pudding."
Or making deliberately unwoke ads that will give them the opportunity to unsincerely apologize for the long-sightedness of the campaign, internally known as Operation Free Money, thank you. And then followed up with a concerningly woke overcorrection, which presumably for a group like One Nation means only insulting two populations. So they're doing really well comparatively. Over to small business news now. Jim of the Jim's, well, at this point, everything franchises, but actually Jim was actually born David. Yeah, that's right. Jim is David. You have been lied to your entire lives. Says that he has received legal advice from one of Australia's top lawyers, who he failed to name, filling us with confidence that the advice is absolutely real and would not at all be the ramblings of an angry pseudoscientist. More on this later. The advice says that sole operators told to stay at home may be entitled to a taxpayer-funded payday in the form of a multi-billion-dollar lawsuit against the Victorian government. Jim is claiming the source of his ire is that council maintenance workers are still allowed to go to work, a claim that I could find no evidence for. I do assume he is talking about the cleaning teams that are out, literally sanitizing services to help the few people who still need to be out and about in the pandemic, who are literally walking around with disinfectant and wiping it everywhere, making them the safest humans out there right now. I imagine the trip home must mess with them a bit though, as they are currently robbed of the power to kill the virus at any given moment. He also claims that his franchisees are not eligible for JobKeeper, which, given that they aren't government employees and are operating as sole traders, really shouldn't be an issue. But look, I could be wrong. It has been a long and complicated road. But then there are other supplements like the horribly underpriced job seeker, which may be able to assist them in this time, which might be like a terrible solution, but it is something. Like, it's better than nothing while they wait to be able to work again. I do, however, suspect that the issue really is that he himself is losing money and can no longer fund his own research into the rise and fall of human civilizations. You see, Jim has a theory that big shifts in society, so like wars, revolutions, the influence of religion, are explainable by changes in brain and hormone activity. And that is why that white people are better than other people. And he wants to create a pill to change people's brains and hormones, curbing some of their more terrible behaviors, hopefully, like racism, and wanting to create a pill to control people. Doesn't sound at all worrying. Look, this isn't the first time that David has caused a ruckus. Recently, he has been seen encouraging his franchisees to defy the lockdown order and continue to mow lawns, retile, or pick up one of Jim's newest franchisees options, Jim's genetic modification. But seriously, he has a secret lab that he funds with money from his franchise. So far, over $1 million to a team of scientists at La Trobe, that's my old school, to continue the research the university turned its back on 3 decades ago. This is a mad scientist origin story. This is the island of Dr. Munracist. This is the Hank Scorpio episode of The Simpsons, except it's not a secret.
What's your least favorite country? Italy or France?
France.
Nobody ever says Italy.
Sorry. Jim says if franchisees are fined, he will pay it. So he is actively encouraging his franchisees to violate health and safety orders. That doesn't sound very restrained to me. And according to Jim, restraint is the temperamental basis of civilization and can account for the domination of white European ethnic groups over the past few hundred years. All of the other races have lost out because they lack either restraint or vigor, or sometimes both. That is a genuine quote from his work and something that he genuinely believes. Prior to the release of the roadmap, there were some leaked and supposedly out-of-date records of the Victorian Roadmap to Recovery plans. These plans claimed that there would be another 2 weeks of stage 4 restrictions, which has proven to be true. But this has not stopped David, Mr. Penman himself, old David, who has continued to actively encourage his franchisees to defy the orders and says he will give them the legal advice that he has paid top dollar for. He continues to claim the issue is that his guys are losing money, $3,000 a week, but his business has an annual turnover of $500 million. I suspect that he probably has some savings put aside. If all he cares about is money, then he can pay for them to stay home, stay safe, and consider the year a write-off, just like the rest of us. Stop trying to be the Elon Musk of Australia, forcing workers back to work when your personal fortune could keep them home and safe for months. You know, one of my jobs is actually offering to pay me at half of my contracted hours and not requiring me to do any sort of work at all. It is a great way to gather trust and sow stability within your workforce. In 2018, before a book about his life came out, he was quoted as saying, "Wrath is my weakness." And his staff claim that he is ruthless and that he even fired a guy a week out from having his first baby. This is not the expected restraint you'd see demonstrated by a white European, according to his research. Sounds like you need some kind of limitless pill to unlock your ultimate potential as not an arsehole. Maybe you should be less concerned with altering the restraint and vigor of ethnic groups that you believe have been dealt a bum hand in epigenetic stakes, like Indigenous Australians, black people and Jews, and start concerning yourself with the anger, temperament and restraint of one David Penman, self-confessed anger guy and secret mad scientist. Moving on to ethics news. Google, company that loves you and would never, ever do anything unethical with your information and only wants you to have the best items at the best prices. You like items, right? You want to save money on those items, don't you? Give Google your information. Google, we know you. Google has been talking about adapting its model, learning from its purposeful misdeeds, and profiting from them like any good criminal. As Google is now Wait, this can't be right. Can someone check the story, please? He asked. Nobody, as I'm here alone. Google is now selling ethical advice to tech companies. Can we make sure to drop a funny sound effect in here at some point? Thanks, future Matt, who will be editing this. I'll leave a gap for audio. Yeah, that should be enough time. This is the monorail guy coming into Springfield, but replace every other town with an unethical behaviour that they have profited from. The company plans to launch an AI ethics services before the end of the year. Initially, Google will offer others advice on tasks such as spotting racial bias in computer vision systems or developing ethical guidelines that govern AI programs, which they presumably learned all about in August 2019 when their own AI systems showed racial bias. But this is just the beginning, as longer term, they may offer to audit customers' AI systems for ethical integrity and charge for ethics advice. I have to assume that this will look like a racial version of the Voight-Kampff test, right?
Maybe you want to be by yourself. Who knows? You look down and you see a tortoise, Leon. It's crawling towards you.
Tortoise? What's that?
You know what a turtle is?
Of course.
Same thing.
Honestly, they have done more unethical things than most companies. They might not be anywhere near heavyweight champions Amazon, but it's an impressive attempt at the title. I have to assume that this is an attempt at the tech company equivalent of the Scared Straight program.
Why you here? Stealing. What the fuck you doing? Stealing something. Bikes.
Except the issue is they are being lectured by guys who didn't face any real consequences for their action, so I am not sure that the lessons will take hold. Except maybe the lesson, you can do whatever you want. And Google are the perfect teachers. After all, they have done it all. They got caught exploiting homeless black people to shore up their facial recognition algorithms. They recently cut its diversity programs to kowtow to conservatives. They demoed a censored search for China. They built an AI-powered weapon programs for the Pentagon, and they have a long history of punishing whistleblowers and activists. They even tried to prevent workers from discussing their labor rights with outsiders at the Google facility and even hired a consulting firm that specializes in blocking unions. So instead of screaming about bikes, that guy the Google employee is talking to is going to be screaming about weapons programs, I suppose. And here is a jokeless list of the things that Google has been found to be doing, put to some lighthearted music to hopefully lighten the mood. Tax avoidance, misuse and manipulation of search results, use of others' intellectual property, concerns that its compilation of data may violate people's privacy, censorship of search results and content, concerns over the energy consumption of its servers, concerns over traditional business issues such as monopoly, restraint of trade, antitrust, idea borrowing, and being an ideological echo chamber. Whew, what a fun list. Google's unofficial motto has long been the simple phrase, "Don't be evil." But that's over, according to a code of conduct that Google distributes to its employees. The phrase was removed. So what I'm hearing is the company famous for having a reminder to its employees to not be evil has removed the language and is selling ethical advice. Selling. Ethical advice. Selling. The company actively removed "Don't be evil" from its own code of conduct and is selling ethical advice. It's the strangest form of selling out that I have ever heard. I thought it was illegal to make money from the publicity of your crimes in America. Just let me look. Yeah, look at that. Look at that. Yep. Here it is. It's called the Son of Sam law, which is not a law against listening to strange dogs and doing what they say. Rather, any law designed to keep criminals from profiting from the publicity of their crimes, often by selling their stories to publishers. Most recently, you might remember accused murderer and comedy movie star O.J. Simpson wrote a not at all considered confessional book titled "If I Did It." about the murder he definitely didn't do according to the courts. Well, this time the courts came through, with a court awarding the book's rights to the Goldman family to help satisfy the judgment. But Google has never officially murdered anyone either. Neither has their silencing of information in China, nor the active development of AI weapons for the Pentagon, which are definitely not being used to kill people, but I wouldn't make such claims, nor would I encourage you to. And not just because Google has very deep pockets and would definitely sue me. But where's the proof? Where is the proof? So don't do it. Do not. Now, Matt, I'll make you say, because you are my strawman antagonist in this piece. Matt, doesn't the updated version of Google's Code of Conduct still retain one reference to the company's unofficial motto? And you'd be right. The final line of the document is still, and remember, don't be evil, and if you see something that you think isn't right, speak up. But it's the final line, and if any company knows that nobody reads a code of conduct, their terms of use, or long lines of text, it should be Google. So this is basically acknowledging that nobody is going to read that line. All this being said, I still used Google to research this article. They know it doesn't matter. Nobody's going to start using Bing to do their research. So here we are. So we here at the Bearer of Weird News are going to start selling our own distinct ethics packages. $5,000 gets you the Do What We Say, Not What We Do package, where we outline a series of minor offences, white lies and small values of terrorist funds that we have laundered and chide you and say you really shouldn't be doing these things. It's only an hour, but the back half is preloaded with team building games that waste time and falsely create a sense of team building. Good fun for everyone. $10,000 is our News Corp special. We run a series of pro-propaganda pieces in a run of friendly or ethically dubious newspapers saying how good you are and how people should be on board with your product and or service. And finally, for $500,000, and I know that's a big price jump, but if you're needing this package, you have other issues, and it's likely that you're embezzling money at this point, so throw a bit of that our way, eh? This is the scorched earth approach, our own Operation Paperclip. You get the full benefits of the other two packages, so we set up a meeting for your employees, do the false team building, get the friendly and ethically dubious newspapers to speak well of you, while we quietly change your identity, sneak you into Argentina, and you can start a new company under much less strict work laws. This is the perfect end to a horrendous career. COVID containment news. As the world continues its various experiments with handling of the coronavirus, some places welding people into their homes, trying a gentler lockdown, a segmental lockdown, and some people just pushing as many in front of the virus as they can in the hopes that it will get tired and stop chasing them. Australia, mostly red Victoria, is having a bit of a problem with coronavirus cases. Definitely not as bad as America, but bad for a government that doesn't leave people to die in a viral thunderdome. We can't just keep looking at America and saying, yeah, sure, things are bad, but we aren't America, because it's a really low bar to leap over. But not everyone is happy with the Vic government's handling of the coronavirus outbreak, and not all of the people who are upset are conspiracy theorists ranting about dictatorships while the government pays large portions of the populations to stay home and safe. The Australian Medical Association has requested a royal commission into the Vic response to COVID-19. And if you haven't listened to one of these before, a royal commission is an investigation. In Australia, they're the highest form of inquiry on matters of public importance. According to the Royal Commissions Act of 1902, they are connected with the peace, order, and good government of the Commonwealth, or any public purpose or any power of the Commonwealth. Royal Commissions have been used to investigate misconduct in particular sectors such as financial services, child protection, home insulation, drug trafficking, and many more. And then to fail to deliver results on most of these matters. Oh sure, things were certainly uncovered, and some policy has been changed, but not nearly enough. I am very curious what the Royal Commission to inquire into circumstances under which certain public monies were used and to whom and for what purposes such monies were paid in 1941 was all about. That definitely sounds like something that needed investigating, kind of, sort of, maybe, if you kind of sort of follow. While initially Dan Andrews wanted a 12-month extension of the state of emergency powers, converting Victoria from the education state to the emergency state, and bringing it only infinitely months behind every other state's unlimited capacity to extend emergency powers. But yeah, sure, Dan is definitely a dictator in this case. A health dictator, according to Tony Abbott. And I guess that makes him doctator? I don't know, like a real Joseph Surgeon. Those who are angry at him will have to start calling him Practitioner Dan. As a compromise, in order to get crossbench MPs in the upper house to support Victoria, he has reduced the request for emergency powers down to 6 months, with monthly reviews, and it is strictly in reference to COVID-19 only. So if another emergency breaks out, too bad, we had our chance. The roadmap just came out, promising Victoria's a minimum 2 more weeks at stage 4 lockdown, and possibly not until November before we reach the elusive COVID normal. There have been cries for changes, cries being both an understatement, as they are more like wild rants, and also an apt description, as when I read these statements, they read as tear-soaked. On top of all the concerns are tyranny, mental health concerns, and most importantly, sweet, sweet sex. Dan Andrews said the government was working on a plan to ease restrictions, including a possible household bubble for those who do not share their home with a partner. One of the few highlights about this whole pandemic, realistically, and there aren't many really, how much official government talk there has been about sex. It's pretty amazing. Like the mayor of Washington DC putting this warning in an official press release that rimming or any sexual activity that involves putting the mouth on one's butt or anus might pass COVID-19, and a Dutch government advising you to find a sex buddy. So really, the single household sex bubble in Victoria is actually pretty tame and way behind the times, given Melbourne is supposed to be one of the leftist hippie utopia of Australia. Really, we're dropping the ball. Good work, Andrews. The sex bubble will have the added benefit of saving people the trouble of having to get fined for sitting in the car while their housemates fuck during a lockdown. The single most accommodating housemate who has ever existed. I had housemates who I managed to figure out were not buying toilet paper because they just presumed that everybody else would do it. That is not wait in the car so that we can have loud sex housemate behavior. This guy is a true friend. Those guys better have offered to pay his fine, the most unlawful fine that I have ever heard of. I know that there are larger issues at play here, but this is not helping the case when people are chanting ACAB here, there and everywhere. Meanwhile, in successful Australia, otherwise known as New Zealand, in Wellington, the city embodiment of a country town, they are having to crack down on the suppression of COVID spread in their own way, with the biggest COVID vector in the entire city possibly being local celebrity cat Mittens. Mittens is an adorable local phenomenon. I personally witnessed Mittens when I was there last. He stopped at a red crossing line, waited, and crossed with the green man, and a local drunk girl lost her mind, screaming down the phone at her friend that she had witnessed Mittens doing a human thing. But because Mittens is so beloved, the concern is that Mittens will get infected, and that infection will spread as people will not hesitate to stop and pat Mittens' adorable head. I mean, New Zealand. Let's talk. Real talk now. You want us to take you seriously, right? We love you and your very on top of it current Prime Minister and your ability to stamp out a deadly virus by just being too far away. But when you are so friendly that a local cat is your biggest threat for a pandemic, you need to sort it out. Are you for real, Wellington? Maybe you aren't feline okay, but this would be clawful. Perhaps the possibility of leaving Mittens alone right now for a little bit is for the best. Right, meow? Is not the time to drop the ball. You need to keep your Mittens to yourself, or this will become a catastrophe. Okay, guys. Well, thanks a lot for listening. Thanks for making it to the end. If you enjoyed this one, please share it around. Send it to a friend. Send it to someone who you think might need a laugh at a time like this, and who you think would get into it. I'd love it if you could share it around. I don't really expect you guys to do anything else. Just stay safe, enjoy yourselves, look after yourselves. I know it's a bit of a difficult time for everybody, so just do your best. Cook some food. Be nice to your partner. And if you're living alone, look forward to that sex bubble. Be a good time for everybody. And hopefully things will start to smooth out soon, and we'll be able to do a bit more. But please do check out my shows when the Fringe Festival comes. So that is sometime in November. I'll have my storytelling show. I got bit by a monkey once, and a couple of these news quiz shows, which I think will be a bit of fun. I'll try and get some interesting guests, and we'll just have a good time. We'll make fun of the news. It'll be good for everyone. Come check it out. I've got older episodes that are similar to that if you want to check those out. See what that might look like. Thanks a lot, guys. See you next time. Stay safe. Wash your hands. Wear a mask. And be good.